This is the practice page for section 2.3 on congruent segments. This top section is a very familiar exercise. They give you a number line, then they give you some statements and they ask you if they are true or false. We'll do a couple of these. Number 4 says V is the midpoint of segment TW. So T lives at the coordinate -6, W lives at 2. So if you average those, you're going to find the coordinate of the midpoint. So add and divide by 2. That gives you -4 divided by 2, which is -2. So V is the midpoint of segment TW. That's true. Number 8. They're asking you if this segment is less than or equal to this segment, and that's written wrong. If you're comparing segment lengths, you should write it like this. This is how you write segment lengths. So that's an error in the book. So if you're trying to correctly write geometry, this is how you're writing it. Okay, so we can still answer this. Is this length less than that length? How far is it from V to W? You could count it, or you could use your ruler postulate. It's -4. It's 4, +4. Lengths can't be negative. From T to V, that's -6 to -2. That's also 4. Is 4 less than or equal to 4? That's true. Now, explain your reasoning. They wrote that here as well. You can explain your reasoning by showing your work. So this is sufficient. Bottom section, determine whether each statement is true or false. Segment XY is congruent to segment YX. True or false? It's true. Explain your reasoning. Well, here's segment XY. Segment YX is the same segment. Is a segment congruent to itself? That's your reflexive property. Number 10, if segment AB is congruent to segment BC, and segment BC is congruent to segment XY, then segment AC is congruent to segment XY. That's false. It looks like they're trying to use the transitive property there. This segment BC is congruent to two different segments, so it's these two segments that should be congruent, not segment AC and segment XY. It should be segment AB congruent to segment XY instead. Number 11, if segment BX is half the length of segment BY, then B is the midpoint of segment BY. Let's take a look at that. I'm just making a random segment and calling it segment BY. If segment BX is half of its length, then X is the midpoint, not B. B is an endpoint, so that's a good reason. Number 12. If segment AY is congruent to segment XR, then segment XR is congruent to segment AY, excuse me. I read it totally wrong. But this is true. If they're congruent this way, they're congruent if you reverse them. That's your symmetric property. Number 13, a line has only one bisector. This is kind of a bogus question. You don't know how long a line is. A line has infinite length. So how are you going to cut it in half? You can't do that. A segment has only one bisector. That makes more sense as a question. But segments don't have one bisector. They have lots of bisectors. You could bisect with a point, or a line, or a segment, or a ray, or a plane. Segments only have one midpoint. Okay, but this is kind of a bogus question. You can't cut a line in half. Number 14, use a compass and a straight edge to bisect the segment. Now we did this in class for section 1.5. So if you are an online student, you didn't get to see that, but I'll show you right here. Here's a compass. This will work as a straight edge. What you want to do is open your compass to a certain distance where you can swing an arc that's definitely past where the midpoint would be. So if we want to bisect the segment, that means we need to find where that midpoint is. Okay, now this distance right here, if I swing an arc this way, I'm definitely going past where the midpoint would be. Now, if you do the same thing to the other side, put your point at A and swing arcs, you're going to have some arcs that cross like that. And those points are important because if you would connect them, that would give you a bisector for the segment. So that point right there on the segment is the midpoint, which bisects the segment. If you wanted to, you could bisect it with a line or part of a line. You could bisect it with another segment, or you could bisect it with a ray. Okay? But that's how you would do it. That's what a construction is.